hooks are one of the most powerful tools that you have in the Copilot CLI. But for me, they were super confusing. I had the hardest time understanding them. And so it really helps to understand then how they actually work in the Copilot CLI, and that helps you understand hooks very well. Here's what you need to know. Let's just start with what happens when you engage in a chat with the agent. So the first thing that you do is you send a prompt to the agent. And then the next thing that happens is that the agent loop then starts. And what this looks like is the first thing that it does is thinking and reasoning. And you see all those tokens come back in the chat. And then the next thing that it does is it does tool calls. So these are things like reading files, writing files, executing bash scripts. And it may do some tool calls, or it may just do one tool call. It just depends on whatever tool calls the agent decides it needs to do. And then what will happen is maybe the agent decides that it needs to launch a sub agent. And that sub agent is really doing the same thing as the agent. It's reasoning and then making tool calls. And these things here, it's important to note that the agent and the sub agents, these are actually loops. So what happens here is this agent runs and runs and runs until it doesn't have any more tool calls to make. And when it doesn't have any more tool calls to make, then it's done. That's what's actually happening. That's how the agent knows it's finished, is when there's no more tool calls. And the sub agent works exactly the same way. They're actually loops. So this thing just runs over and over and over again. And then at some point, right at the end of this thing, you get this like response where it tells you what it did or it's done, etc. Right? And so this is what the actual chat process looks like here, or kind of like at a high level, how it works. Let's just connect some of these arrows here so I feel good about this. Good. Now, what hooks allow you to do are to execute events at various points in this right here, which we might call the agent lifecycle. And keep in mind that this may continue, right? So you may have another prompt down here at the bottom, and then you get another agent loop. So like this whole thing starts over again, right? And this may be to you, it's all the same chat session, and the context of all of what happened up here gets passed down in here as well. But this right here is essentially the agent lifecycle. And so hooks allow us to execute some commands at different points, as we said. So the first one is when you start a new session and send your first prompt, an event called session start fires. So that's the first one. And then every time you send a prompt, there is a user prompt submitted event that fires. And these are the hooks. They're really just events, but they're called hooks. So user prompt submitted, and it's important to note that this user prompt submitted will fire again right down here. If you do another prompt, it will fire again, whereas session start only fires after the very first message in a session. And then the next one that happens is before tool calls, before and after, we have pre-tool use, and then we have one after it, and that hook is called post-tool use. And then for our sub agents here, we actually have events for those as well. So there's a hook for the sub agent that's sub agent start, and I believe one for sub agent stop. Okay. And then we have one event here at the very end, right here at the response, which is basically session end. And then we have one more hook that fires just kind of, it doesn't really have a place in the life cycle, just wherever this might occur, which is just error. It's either on error or error occurred. I think it's error occurred. And this just fires whenever there's an error in here. So what these hooks allow you to do is that you can handle any one of these, and some of these hooks are blocking and some of them are not. So for instance, sometimes all you can do is handle what happened, but in the case of hooks like pre-tool use, you can actually say, based on whatever you decide in this hook, yes or no, you may or may not call this tool. And that's it. Now you know how hooks work behind the scenes. Check the docs for more information. You can start using those right now.